All right, so a couple things. One, we're going to try and get to as many questions as we've had. We left some time, so if you haven't got a question there yet, you see a question you like, please either ask it or upvote it, and we will definitely try and get to those. The point is openness, transparency, and getting you the answers you need. So that is exactly what we're going to try and do. You'll notice that we have an extra person on the panel here today. Johnny is TrendAI's new CISO, actually. So maybe, Johnny, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep. Excited to be here. Excited to talk to you, especially if you have questions around security program, AI security, any of those things. Happy to have the discussions.
Yeah, and Johnny's going to be on stage after lunch as well, sharing a bit more about his background and how he's helping to shift what we're doing at TrendAI.
Yep.
And of course, all our panelists that are on here, we've got some fantastic questions that have already come in. And if I'm going to get started with one that maybe I'll give you a softball if you really want me to, Rob. This one's, how did you get kicked off the submarine?
Oh, that's a great question. It turns out that it's frowned upon to have kidney stones when you're several thousand miles from shore and several hundred feet underwater. So it wasn't glamorous. It was just a medical issue.
Okay, I gave you the softball. I gave you the softball. Shir, I'm going to come to you with a question. It's really about what measurable frameworks are being used to evaluate AI governance today that you're seeing, and what should we be thinking about?
Well, I think, again, as I spoke about earlier, there's no one-size-fits-all in every organization. It's understand the building blocks of the organization, understanding your frameworks, understanding who it is that you're looking to secure within your organization, cyber culture, but also how you're rolling out your AI. The micro-segmentation, of course, is critical within your organization. Understanding the need for the different tools that don't just span across the whole organization, but what is needed and why. Really establishing the gateways all the way through. And again, understanding the personnel, as I spoke about, but giving the upskilling, giving the education, and ongoing training needs to happen as well, just in a concise form.
Perfect. All right, I'm going to probably maybe surprise a couple people here. The people that were nice enough to put their names in, if you don't mind, Trey Murphy, where are you? Wave wildly or make noise. Okay. Someone's feeling shy or has stepped away. All right, Trey actually had a question that 8 of you have upvoted, so I'm going to ask it for Trey. I'm going to start with asking Rob, with limited budget, what do you recommend enterprise organizations prioritize around AI defense in a rapidly changing environment? And I'd like Johnny to sort of follow that up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's visibility, right? And we've heard people say it time and time again, and I think it's knowing which AI applications that you're using or knowing what all your ins and outs are of your network. I think everything starts with observability and visibility, which Rachel mentioned earlier.
Yep. Yeah, I was going to say visibility is the starting place for everything. Something that costs no budget to do is to make sure that you become a business partner. If you're in that CISO position or that security leader position and you're not tightly aligned with what your business is doing, they're going to buy, build, adopt without you, and they'll just go around you. So if you're a CISO leader, you have to really understand how valuable it is. It doesn't cost anything, but it's relationship building, and it's one of the most critical things you can do.
Perfect, perfect. Chris Bisignano, I'm brutal with names. I apologize if I butchered your name, Chris. Chris, are you around here? All right, you're enthusiastic. I love it. You had a few questions. But I'm going to get you to ask. I'm going to show you which one I want you to ask. That one, too. I think Bob would be a great one to answer this one.
What do you think will be the biggest AI-driven cybersecurity threat in the next 3 to 5 years?
Okay, so I think the biggest one, in terms of the one that will actually impact most of the people in this room, and this is the boring answer, but it's the current one that you're actually facing right now, just scaled up, right? In a lot of cases. So like, criminals are actually incredibly unimaginative most of the time, right? That's one of the reasons for being a criminal is it's a lazier solution than having a real job like everybody here in this room does, assuming you consider yourself having real jobs, by the way. So all of those type of attacks we see today amplified up. You won't even know if AI is necessarily behind them because you just see you're on the receiving end of the kind of final product. But then outside of that is honestly the whole just change of the entire ecosystem into an agentic style one. We will see, for example, like criminal underground markets for agents, right? Or for MCP servers or all of those type of things. And initially, it will be groups putting these together themselves and kind of stringing together all these agents into a new criminal ecosystem. But we will actually see in the future where criminals will be saying, okay, go out onto the various criminal agent markets, tell me what I should be buying and pulling into my organization. So that's going to kind of change, but that's maybe like 6 months plus out. In the near term, it's really what we're facing now, but just exponentially scaled.
Perfect. Thanks, Bob. I think that's great. We've got a bunch of anonymous people, a little more shy, so I'm going to proxy them for the crowd here. Rob, AI innovation is happening with or without cybersecurity team partners. How do you think, from your perspective at Anthropic, that TrendAI is helping defenders to align with organizations like Anthropic?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned in my earlier talk, I mean, we're developing the frontier models. TrendAI brings 4 decades of domain expertise, visibility, the ability to understand your businesses, that we just don't have from our view right now. And I think a strong partnership where we get feedback from Trend on what's working in our models and what can go into future models that will help them, we really have an incredible partnership right now, and they understand your business. And I think their focus on customers and our focus on model development is going to make us stronger in the future.
Perfect, perfect. And one of the things I'll mention to the panelists on stage, if you have an opinion you'd like to add to it, feel free to just jump in afterwards. It doesn't have to just be me. So Greg McDonald, are you in the room somewhere here? Greg. All right, you're an enthusiastic questioner too. I love it. So I'm going to get you to answer. And this, Greg, you're the model. Come on, everyone. If you got a question, go ahead and answer. This is your opportunity. Not every question, though, okay? So this one here. I think that's a fantastic question, maybe for Johnny and for Shira.
All right. Every software vendor now says they're an AI company. What are 2 or 3 questions that every business should ask to ensure their AI isn't just a backdoor into the company's data?
Oh, love that question.
Yes.
There are so many companies out there that are calling themselves AI companies, which are truly not AI companies. They're just utilizing AI within their companies. It could be for something really small, as a small area of automation. All of a sudden, they're an AI company. Trust us, come in, we'll do everything for you. When in turn, it's almost like the mask over, trying to lure them in, as you mentioned, but really not doing things effectively. So the first thing is, what if you ripped out that piece of AI? Would what you're trying to sell work without it? Is it really an AI company driven by AI, utilizing AI to do the greater good, greater bad, however you want to do it within the organization? But can it continue without that element of AI? Real AI is driving what needs to be done and doing it effectively in the right manner. So really good question, because there are a ton of companies out there, certainly a lot that I've seen that are calling themselves AI companies that are truly not. So correct, asking the right questions, understanding the makeup of the organization, but also understanding what the outputs are and how they actually work.
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect view. And I'll share, anybody ever heard of a service called There's an AI for That? Quick show of hands, anybody know this service? All right, a couple of people. So one of the reasons I highlight this one is because, to Shira's point, the marketplace gets really noisy around buzzwords of AI. And we've been using elements of AI, machine learning, AI principles for many, many years. And, in fact, even within TrendAI, we've been using, it's a part of our fabric and DNA for decades, right? We've been using these principles. But what happened over the last few years is it became a buzzword, and everyone started, bolting on a component. So I'll share this a couple years ago when I signed up for There's an AI for That. which basically just corrals all the different services and capabilities and workflows into kind of a dashboard that you can visualize. Type in, your challenge and maybe give yourself an example. Well, 2 years ago, there was about 400 services in there. And probably if you Google it today, it's around 45,000 services.
Wow.
Right, in 2 years. And my point to that is, do you think 45,000 companies or capabilities popped up? It's like, no, they took their query, they took, some mechanisms, they rebranded them as AI. So whenever you are investigating that, there's some legitimate, really good services. What you need to do is, from a technical capability, understand, and I love that question, because if you say, hey, we're an AI native company, and then you look at their tech stack and you can pull out the one AI component, right? Like maybe they're doing AI notes and that didn't really change your life. But you take that tech out and all of a sudden they're still functioning and have a standalone product. Well, they're not an AI company, right? They're not AI native. And one of the things that we were talking about yesterday, I would give a shout out to Dr. Grace Trinidad in the here with IDC. We were talking about this idea of it can't be bolt on, right? And that's a big change. When you look at TrendAI, we've built Vision 1, we've built AI natively into the fabric of it. So for me, an AI company, an AI native company, their technology stack is centered around the AI they're using. They didn't bolt in an AI feature or capability. So love that.
Oh, thank you. I want to add on one quick point also, a little bit to the side of that. A lot of folks out there are masking themselves as AI experts. They might have used Claude once, they might have used ChatGPT. Now on their resumes or on their LinkedIn, AI expert. So when we're talking about, companies, are they true AI native companies, but are folks true AI experts? Understand what that means, because read the fine print. It's not necessarily what it seems to be. As I said earlier, seeing is not believing.
Yeah.
Perfect. I just had a good one come in from David McMinney? David, you in here? Over there. Jeez, I got to get better at moving around this place. All right. All right, I just saw the hand. Where'd you go? David? Oh. So you'd asked a question about, yeah.
Do you see smaller to mid-sized businesses being the focus of attacks moving forward based on smaller cybersecurity budgets?
Bob, I'd love to hear from you. I'd also like to hear from Johnny as well.
Sure.
Could you repeat that?
I think it was.
I can go first.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Rob.
No, go ahead.
Oh, look, they all have an opinion.
Right, we all do. Right. So I think generally when we talk about cybercrime, right, it's very simple to think that cyber criminals truly target organizations. In most cases, unless it's like a nation state type thing, what they're actually doing is they're using something like a supply chain or something like that to target everything they possibly can. And then what they do is they triage that down. So then some criminals will take the enterprise victims out of that. Some ones will say, I just want the SMBs because I know how to monetize those, right? So that doesn't fundamentally change. It's a case that it just lets them target more in every single category. More enterprise, more SMB, more small, more everything else. So that's what we focus.
Yep. I think that, to Bob's point, cyber criminals are smart because they are natively lazy. I kind of, how many people in the room have, quick show of hands, have enjoyed over the years the Nigerian prince scam that wants to send you guys some money, right?
Wait a second, I thought I was special.
Yeah, you were, but
That was a scam?
Oh, well.
special like everyone else. I use that one because I think years ago, we've all experienced it, we've seen it for years, and Bob can attest to this. Years ago, we looked at that, and if you got it, you said, this is silly, like who falls for this, right? But that's actually the point of those, is they couldn't scale to the size of being able to, mass market to 500,000 people. And then if 500,000 people responded, they couldn't handle that. So they didn't have the business model to scale. So they did it in a way that they could basically reduce, like who's naive, who's going to fall for this. So I might send it to 500,000 people, but I might only have 1,000 people that actually become my target, right? And reduce the footprint. But now it's changing because AI AI can actually scale their operations up so they can address a market size of 500,000 people. And that's a huge shift. And I think one of the things that happens with attacks is sometimes they just get lost and they're not targeting a specific market or specific vertical. It's a lot harder to go after. You know, it might be more money, but it's a lot harder to go after like a large enterprise and like fintech or something like that. So sometimes it's, that old spray and pray kind of tactic where they go bigger, but now because of AI, they can actually scale up to meet or match that demand of the market that they're going after.
Yeah.
I'd like to add to that a little bit. You have to think about the whole area of social engineering their way in. In the past, very much, targeted, you talk about whale fishing, spear fishing, we talk about all of that. But now it's so much easier for the adversaries to gain information. Just look even on LinkedIn. People put so much information out there. And every person can be an area of the human factor risk, or they could be part of the solution, as I spoke about earlier as well. However, when people put out so much information, it's giving knowledge to the adversaries to gain entry, to gain trust, to get information back, to be able to spread that wide web, infiltrating the largest of organizations that seem impenetrable. But it does happen. People need to understand what they put out there is risky. Think about all these AI apps. I see some of the biggest executives out there doing this, and it blows my mind. If you see this, if you enter your information, I'm going to create this great cartoon of you. So you see this big executive of a very large company. He puts all the stuff he's reading, the type of books. He's putting some awards. He's putting some things he finds interesting. All this cool stuff. All of a sudden, this great cartoon comes out of him, and he shares it across social. Wow, I just knew all these things about this guy. Another way in. Social engineering the way in. Everybody is susceptible.
Yeah, just to echo what Johnny said and what Bob said earlier, offensive cyber operations or criminal cyber operations are resource intensive, or they had been in the past, right? And even as a nation state, if you were going after certain targets, you had to down select and you had to choose your targets carefully. With AI, I think it's changing a lot, actually. And so I'm able to take what used to take a team of 10 people and now do it with maybe one and some agents. So I think that we're just going to see this fundamental shift in attackers' ability, lower barriers to entry, and things that used to be opportunistic in the past, now with AI can be more targeted.
Yeah, and it's just like we see in a lot of our industries, right, that like frontline support or like level 1 support and a lot of things is getting automated. It's exactly the same for cyber criminals. So that lets them remove that layer and scale things up.
I have one more thing to add quickly. How many of you have ever played Candy Crush? I know, weird question, right? Come on, more of you. How many? Come on, guys. Have any of you ever read the terms of engagement? No hands, right? When something's a fad or something is something we want to do, people don't really read things. They kind of move ahead. The terms of engagement there was I could access your contacts, I could read your emails, get your phone number, et cetera, across the board. Think about all these folks. Maybe it's a big executive. Maybe it's somebody in part head of the security. But it's their time. I'm just playing a game. What do I care? It's nothing to do with work. But now someone has access to their personal information. A way in. Terms of engagement, reading the rule sets, understanding what you're accessing, but also what you're giving over to get what you want. Another human element that we have to look at in the advancement of AI.
Yeah, I think finally, and this is probably for Johnny as well, is we're seeing this trend towards platform plays in organizations. And I think for small and medium-sized businesses where you don't have a ton of resources and you don't have a large SOC, I think eliminating the gaps and seams between point products and moving towards a platform like the one that TrendAI has, that is a really, really efficient way to gain full spectrum visibility, the ability to block. And someone asked about, what should you spend your money on? I think you should spend it on effective cybersecurity platforms.
Yep.
Perfect. All right, there's been a few questions, most of them anonymous, and it's sort of the elephant in the room, so I'm just going to ask it. So this one is from a concerned healthcare CISO, but there's a bunch of them. Shouldn't there be a system where frontier model creators like Anthropic and others work with vendors like TrendAI to deliver malicious code from their platforms and otherwise. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the partnership we have and how we're working on that.
Yeah, that's great timing. I don't know if I paid someone to put that question in there, but we just recently announced a product called Claude Security that's available to Claude for Enterprise customers that allows customers like TrendAI and other partners to upload code bases using Opus 4.7 to look for vulnerabilities in the code, right? We have announced publicly that we found, 20-something-year-old vulnerabilities in OpenBSD and the Linux kernel, and these are code bases that pen testers and vulnerability researchers have been looking at for decades and have not found it. What will happen as AI continues to proliferate and models become more capable is these capabilities will be distilled by less responsible actors, end up in open source models. And like Bob said before, these open source models will be chained together where we will not have visibility to see what is happening, as I described in my presentation earlier. And those who aren't moving at the speed of AI defensively, they'll be left behind, and actors, will have harder attribution, as you said in your presentation. I think things are going to accelerate so quickly. So tools like Claude Security and reducing the attack surface as quickly as possible. I mean, like as a frontier lab, it's a priority for us. And especially, I think the question earlier was like, what do I see the biggest threat? Like, I'm terrified of an AI-enabled attack on critical infrastructure. And so, we lived where I lived in the federal government through SolarWinds, Colonial Pipeline, JBS Foods, one after another. And I'm just really, really worried that some of these tools are going to get into the hands of irresponsible actors, criminals. They'll find a vulnerability in some sort of OT equipment that is widespread, and we'll see some sort of large outage in one of the 16 critical infrastructure sectors. I don't know that we're ready for it as a nation yet.
Perfect. Juan Alvarez, you around? This was a really good one because we all know that the data problem with AI is huge. So Juan, I'm going to let you ask your question here. Excuse me. Thank you. Come through. Where'd you go? Oh, there you are.
Maybe you can read it better than I do.
No. These are your words.
I'm concerned about how do you go about preparing your data before AI adoption, because it's all about the data.
Absolutely, and can you wait, right? All right, actually anyone on the panel, but Shira, maybe you could give a perspective from all the organizations that you advise. Johnny, you've lived this, and Bob, you probably see it from a threat actor perspective, so there's a few different angles we can talk about there. Excuse me. Shira, you start.
Okay, wasn't sure where you're going. So as we all know, data is king. Whoever has access to it, whoever controls it, has the keys to the kingdom. So what do? I almost would like to give an analogy. It's almost like when cloud became a thing. And I was like, we're uploading it to the cloud, this magical thing in the air where it's all going to be safe, and let's just keep putting it there. And, there's controls around the perimeter, not realizing we have to secure within the cloud as well. So when it comes to data, to go back to your question, really, it's kind of like the same thing. Not everything needs to be fed through. You really need to understand what the critical elements and have a real understanding of where your data sits, where it lies, who has access to it at all times. Data at rest, data at movement, and where it lands. There has to be controls across every part of it. But even more so is which areas, not all your data needs to be fed into different AI systems if it's not relevant. It's understanding the relevancy, the reasons for your actions, and building that through. So the understanding, the breaking it down, and then understanding on also, again, the zero trust around it, who has access to it, and then continue on with your task, where it also is secured and monitored along the way.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think it's interesting with AI because we are putting AI, like from a security perspective, almost like it is an entirely different category. But Rob and I were talking this morning, and one of the things he said was, you still need to be brilliant at the basics. And good data hygiene is a basic thing. And it's something that security organizations still get challenged with because we want to just throw all the data, at AI. And that's not the right model, right? We also know like a very old concept is, garbage in, garbage out. So you want to have good data hygiene. You want to filter your data. You want to understand, contextually what's in that data. And then kind of the next layer to that is start having training specific data sets. If you're going to use foundational models, or you're going to build, small language models, start carving out that data for specific functions and tasks. And it kind of goes back to the principle of, DLP. You want to make sure that the right people in the room have the right access when they need it, and the wrong people aren't moving data around. It's the same thing in the age of AI.
Yeah, and so both sides, so like what we would do internally in threat research and then kind of what cyber criminals are doing. So in threat research, we take subsets of our data that we think are valuable for a specific goal or specific purpose. We do clean that up. We make sure it's in a good format. And we actually, we can ask AI to help us with that whole cleaning up because it's the one that's going to process them. And then you effectively treat it a little bit like you would a junior member of the team, or well, currently a junior member of the team. There will be more like a senior member of the team as things go on. But in the same way as I wouldn't just give a whole bunch of files to like an intern and be like, right, go through them and find me the interesting things and give me a report. The report will come back with most things that I don't actually need. So what we do is we specify the data first, but we also specify the outcomes that we're expecting. So like, this is what I expect you to come back with. And then you kind of fine tune that a bit over time. And that's been quite successful. Interestingly, we see this constantly, attackers struggling with this as well, because attackers' data is even messier than our data, because it's like stolen files from like 20, 30 different companies, all using their own formats to structure this stuff, and they're trying to like standardize it so they can have services where they like sell that data and everything on top of that. And we actually genuinely see a lot of complaints in criminal forums, again, like I don't feel bad for them, but them giving out about like when they ask questions and the data was polluted and it's junk and all that kind of thing. So they have the exact same trouble that everybody does to process this stuff. But there is best practices that we can all do. Standardize the input, standardize the output, what you expect, and be very clear with your instructions, and it gets a lot better very quickly.
And Shira said something in her talk earlier that I hear all the time from CISOs. It's like, I'm being pressured from my board for this organization to become agentic, and I'm concerned about security and data provenance, data loss, and all the things. I think, you just mentioned the word intern, right? We're now multiplying that by thousands when we become agentic. Would you let thousands of interns just loose in your network with access to all of your data? And I think you have to take a step back and you have to have a real plan on what data you're going to expose to agents and processes, and then really make sure that you have, again, visibility into what sanctioned applications are touching your data, right? I have so many conversations with CISOs who say, well, we only have one sanctioned AI app in the organization, and then you kind of get a usage report, and you're like, well, I can see your employees are accessing, 45 either other shadow AI applications, or they're just, to what you said earlier, it's too hard, so I'm going to bypass the sanctioned one, and I'm going to go to do something that makes my life easier. So again, visibility, strict control, and a lot of planning up front.
That's awesome. I love that. From a data perspective, it's not just about the volume. It's about what output do you want? What value do you want out of this use of AI? It's not just dump it all in and hope for the best, right? Because then, Shira, you asked some great questions about what could go wrong. Well, we all know that a lot could go wrong. Scott Wyatt, are you? There you are. You had just asked this fantastic question that I think will resonate with everyone in here, and it's all about how people are using AI, like the board is asking them to, and to get the speed that we're all looking for. Go.
How do we guide the conversation on protection without restricting innovation to leadership?
So this definitely goes back to the board conversation. Preview, we're going to have some of these conversations tomorrow as well, but I'm going to start with Johnny. You've got some experience with this one.
Yeah. I talked a little bit earlier, like it doesn't cost anything to be a business partner. And for far too long, I think, cybersecurity teams are very inwardly focused. And, rightfully so, we're tasked with protecting the organization. But you can't protect something you don't know about. And if you become the department of no, if you're a roadblock, if you're slowing them down, they move around you. So one of the encouragements I would do is, first of all, change your language. Oftentimes when I work with security leaders, they are very, very technical, and they think that they're going to come into a board setting and have this very technical conversation to showcase knowledge, showcase mastery of the program. Those are all good things. Leave those at your security program level. Come into the boardroom understanding what are the economics of the business you're in, what are you trying to drive value in, how can you become a partner that allows them to grow and not shrink. And I'll just ask this question because it's a fun one. Anybody like F1 or racing? All right, good show, a lot of people. I use F1 racing as a really good example because oftentimes when we think about security and we're communicating security, we think of it like a roadblock or slowing us down. And if you've ever looked at an F1 car, when they're whizzing around the track very fast, 300 kilometers an hour for our non-US folks in here, they actually have blistering red brakes. And those brakes on that car are massive. They're about 4 times the size of a normal car. They're beautifully engineered. But the brakes are actually there so that the driver has confidence to go fast, right? We only see it as like governance or controls. Oh, that's to slow the car down. No, it allows that driver to have confidence to go into that turn really fast. And your security programs, the way that you communicate them, the way you're talking to the board, you need to, have the brake concept, but so that it gives them confidence to adopt AI faster, move faster, and understand that you can protect them at speed.
I have a follow-on to that that's pretty natural. I'm going to ask Shira this one. This one's anonymous, so I don't have to run around the room as much, so thank you for that. If you were advising a Fortune 500 CISO with limited resources, hey, that sounds pretty reasonable, given the budgets declining in terms of growth, what's the first 3 AI security controls you would prioritize this year? So building on what Johnny just said, it's a pretty natural next step. How do I actually get the budget?
Well, really understanding what your goals are in the organization, the makeup of your organization. If you're doing it, either you're too quick, too slow, you want to do it just right, as I spoke about earlier. How do we do that just right? Building it down, breaking it down, really having also the CISO understanding the operations of the organization, as I talked about digital transformation across the organization when they're incentivized to work together, operations and security. So you have a better understanding about what the operations are going, so you could have the ability to secure it and put the right protocols into place. So they have to have open communication that way, have open visibility that way, and be able to move forward together. So once the CISO understands that, they also have to understand is what is the speed they need to move at and why. A lot of the times, people don't answer the why. We need to move quicker. We need to implement. We need to do it quicker, faster, better. Yeah, we'll do governance. We'll do these things. But why? Why do you want to do each step? Break it down and give the reasons for. If you're able to do that, the board could really understand it as well. And I love the way you said is leave a lot of the technical outside, bring real-world examples, business type of conversation that they understand, but also open it up and be a team together. We're in this together, that culture, that cyber culture in the room. Let's work together to deliver the better good, but do it right. So understanding the makeup, understanding your personnel, people, process, technology, and governance, all together will answer that question for you.
Awesome. Rob, you've probably heard a lot of that too, yeah?
Yeah. I guess YOLO is not a good answer here. But so, I think it's really understanding the business outcome that you want to achieve, right? To Shira's point. It's, if I'm a CISO and I'm going into a board meeting and I walk in and I say, well, I want to bring AI into my security operations center because it's going to reduce the number of alerts that I have to triage every day. Like, what is the so what of that?
What does it mean to you?
Yeah, what does it mean to you as a business leader? And we all know as security practitioners in this room that there are still not enough of us to go around even in the world of AI, right? And so if I'm able to put someone from Johnny's team on a higher value task rather than triaging 25,000 alerts every day and not getting to the ones that you need to get to, I think the business outcome is like, we just became more secure, right? And so being able to articulate that as a security leader at a board level and justify additional resources and spend is extremely important.
Correct.
I'll add too. I think one of the gaps that I see when I talk to security leaders is there's not talking about the outcomes, but we also sometimes communicate the wrong metrics, right? And I'll give you an example. It's kind of a real world story. A few years ago, I'd gotten this questionnaire from our board, and they wanted certain metrics that I think probably one of the board members got from another advisory panel. And one of the surface level conversations was, how many attacks are you seeing at your attack surface annually, right? Now, here's like the fate of this story. So at that time, it was about 750 million specialized events across the entire attack surface. That happened to be a pretty busy year for China. I was at a large international university. We had a large Chinese national student population. China was very active. Reporting that metric seemed good on the surface, but guess what they asked the next year when we went from 750 million down to about 520 million? What's wrong? What did you miss? Are we less secure? And contextually, you can answer those questions, but it's a really hard conversation when you have, really good board members and they think something's wrong. And what I started doing was, instead of reporting on those kind of metrics, I wanted to quantify our risk, showcase maturity, how are we delivering value, things that we're able to enable the company to move faster with. Those were all much better metrics to track and showcase value, because that's actually how you partner with the business and show them how you're not slowing them down.
Perfect. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, because we talk a lot about how AI is being used, of course, to drive the business forward, to go faster, to do more. And, we've talked a little bit this morning about frameworks, about governance. Bob, I'd love to hear it from your perspective, and then Bob and Rob. Geez, I didn't even realize that one. From your perspective, it's good that I'm not using Robert and Robert, right? Yeah, there you go. What does effective collaboration between AI labs, AI companies, and governments actually look like in today's day and age? We've got this geopolitical mayhem that's happening. We've got the speed of AI. Bob, I'm going to ask you to start. I know you've got a ton of experience and connections into law enforcement, so to give that perspective. And then, Rob, you take a swing at it from the other side.
Sure. I think it all comes down to ultimately kind of the first principles of this, right? And you alluded to this when you were talking about the new cloud security and so on. Ultimately, what are we actually trying to do? Nobody wants to bring out a new technology or walk blindly into a new world with a technology where it gets worse for everybody on the internet, right? We want to make the world a better place, generally speaking, right? That's what motivates me every day anyhow, right? So within that space, you have the security teams, the likes of Anthropic and ourselves. We have the law enforcement people. We have even people within the industry that are technically considered competitors, at a marketing point of view. But we all constantly talk to each other to share intelligence that will make the world a safer place than it was actually yesterday. And there's an enormous amount of goodwill for that. And you increasingly see it at the companies like yourselves, where that goodwill goes all the way up to the board level. So it's not just these security practitioners that are actually talking to each other. It's the companies that truly believe that this is the right way to actually solve this problem.
Yeah, I mean, we see it time and time again when we talk about Salt Typhoon or Volt Typhoon. Yep. None of us have perfect visibility, right? Yep. Industry, we have to share with government, and governments have to share with industry. And I think as a frontier lab, we love seeing organizations like Trend have ZDI and find vulnerabilities and report those up to do patching and remediation. We're going to continue to see what you alluded to earlier, which was, again, chaining these LLMs together, and nobody is going to have perfect visibility. The government will not be able to see it. We have to share, and we're going to be much, much better together if we continue to build bridges across organizations and work with organizations in government like CISA and NSA's Cybersecurity Collaboration Center, and then really share threats across industry as well.
I can just add to that just a sec as well, just what you said about nobody has all the pieces of the puzzle and so on. We internally actually call that sometimes the jigsaw model of security. So even within the teams within TrendAI, we constantly are aware that each person has a single piece of the puzzle. So we have centralized intelligence databases and things where everybody adds in, and it's only over time they start joining together and you start saying, oh, hang on, this is actually all the same thing. And then if you can pull in from external people and everybody else, the picture gets clearer. It'll never be the full jigsaw, right? It'll be like that horrible one that you find that has missing pieces at the end, and you're like that. But you still have a pretty good idea what you're actually looking at, and you can take action against it.
Yeah, I can't tell you the number of times when I was in government where we saw symptoms of a disease, but we didn't know it was a disease. You're just like, we know this doesn't look right, this telemetry doesn't look correct, and then you go out and you talk to an organization who has a different piece of telemetry, and you start pulling those symptoms together, and you say,
Yeah.
oh, heck,
We know we're
we now have a very serious disease, and we need to work together to fix it.
Yep.
Awesome. Mark Thompson, are you in the house here somewhere? Okay. Oh, wow, of course you're way back there.
And he's off.
All right.
Getting your steps
I think this is a fantastic question for pretty much anyone on the panel, because we all know everyone in the room here has a million priorities that are being asked to do more. It does ultimately come down to prioritization, because we know budgets are not going to be exponentially increasing at any time. So Mark, maybe I'll let you to ask this question.
Which do you feel...
Sorry.
Is that my spelling?
That is your spelling, but I think you're okay. I couldn't fix it. I didn't have AI on this one, sorry.
We'll just keep going. Which do you feel is the higher priority, securing AI or teaching the better ways to use it?
This is the human in the loop, right?
I don't think you have to choose one or the other. I think education needs to be there in order to secure appropriately and have the right folks around it doing it appropriately within the organization. Securing AI without the education around it is basically saying, let's put a lock on the cabinet, but not saying what's in it and how to utilize what's inside. I think that education and upskilling within the organization is critical. Understanding what the job qualifications and what the outputs for each of the people within your organization, and also the different siloed groups within your organization, what they need to be, educating them appropriately, doing it the right way because of what their output should be, what their goals are. But also, obviously, security is critical, but also within the organization, because AI-based attacks are coming intensely. But the education around it, again, leads to almost let cyber culture in the organization be part of the solution in order to affect the greater good. I think they go hand in hand. You can't separate them. But good question.
Yeah, Johnny, you and I actually had a conversation about this last week. Maybe you can chime in there.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? If you think about AI as a tool, what ends up happening for a lot of organizations is we use the term, which is like, oh, go adopt, right? Like we should adopt AI. But if you think about it from a practical sense, in the training perspective, we don't often teach people how to, optimize their usage with tools and those kind of things. So my take on it from like what Shira said, which was spot on, is if you're going, how do you secure something when you don't understand how people are using it, right? The way that your finance team is using AI is going to be different than your dev team. So you have to know what are they using, how they're going to use it, and what's their intended outcome. And then all of those go together. And honestly, if you're in an organization and you have good maturity or high adoption already, you should look to those weaker areas and look to how you can actually provide some of that best practice training to those areas so that the folks, everybody gets upskilled, everybody gets lifted up in the organization.
If I can just add to that as well, I just think when we talk about knowledge and upskilling the entire workforce and things to understand this, it's different, especially when you're dealing with an exponentially growing technology like this, because the opposite to knowledge you could often say is lack of knowledge or stupidity or whatever. But when you're in actual exponential growth, then the opposite of knowledge is fear, because they genuinely have no idea the pace is going so quickly. And you can educate your way out of that. So all of us in this room have lived through another exponential curve, which was COVID. At least, well, unless there's any 4-year-olds in the room, in which case you aged horribly. I'll just tell you that now. But in that time, when we started to educate ourselves and we understood, okay, how do diseases spread and what do all these statistics mean and so on, suddenly that fear lifts off and you know what to do and you know how to protect your family or your organization or whatever, right? So it's the exact same in the AI world. But you also then add to that the technology, just like we did in the COVID times. We had masks, we had distancing, we had whatever else that we had that would work in the vaccines and so on. So first of all, you need to remove the fear with knowledge and enable people to do things themselves, and then support them with the actual technology.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a frontier lab who, safety and security is not a cost center for us. It's developed built into our model from day one. We're building in safety. We're talking about it publicly, which has led to some interesting conversations with the U.S. government. You know, we truly believe that like the responsible scaling policy, which Anthropic coined, as these models get more powerful, we need to have additional safeguards in place. So when we give a frontier model to a customer and partner like Trend, those safeguards are already built into the model. And then it's deployed into the customer network where they understand your business model. And there are additional safeguards put in place to protect the agents that are doing the work in yours. So, you know, we as a Frontier Lab will do our part to ensure that safety and security is built in, and then give it to Johnny and Rachel and the team to deploy it.
Yeah, it's a great partnership.
So we've seen a lot, and you know, Rachel presented earlier this morning about the discovery of vulnerabilities. And you know, someone asked a question anonymously, but the question is really all about, if we know where all the vulnerabilities are, then we're good, right? And I think Rachel had a really good perspective on it, but I'd love to hear that perspective from you, Rob, as well as you, Bob, from a vulnerability perspective. So maybe Rob will start with you.
Yeah, look, discovering vulnerabilities is great. Remediating them and patching them is now the bottleneck, right?
Exactly.
And so, you know, time and time again, and Johnny and I were talking about this earlier, I think the Cloud Security Alliance in 2018 published a statistic that was something like, it was 771 days from vulnerability discovery to exploit. They just recently updated that in early 2026. It's now hours from vulnerability discovery to exploit. So how do I get automated patching, or how do I get a ball bearing shop in, you know, rural US to go from vulnerability discovery, patch development, patch deployed on a Windows 10 system on a CNC machine that no one has looked at in years? Like, that is the challenge. And I think, you know, having a platform in place that gives you time between vulnerability discovered and exploit is developed and then deployed against your network, and that's extremely, extremely important right now.
Yeah, 100%. It's a bigger issue than just the finding of the vulnerability is the first part of the whole system, right? So like, if you, like we talked about earlier on about the TrendAI ZDI program, and the word program is really important in that. It's not a TrendAI ZDI database of vulnerabilities, right? It's the what happens when we find them. And that is the, like when, like Pwned happening this week, there will be dozens of new vulnerabilities found. We will purchase some of those. But it's what happens behind the scenes, which probably doesn't make a great stat, you know, on a board. It is the phone calls that go through to those organizations, educating them, right? Some of them we have really good relationships with already. They know us. When we reach out, we're giving them really good packages that they can remediate. Other ones have never even heard of a vulnerability program, and we have to educate them and bring them up to speed and help hold their hand to get to the point where they can secure their software and make the world a safer place. So it's that next level as well that comes in, and also the prioritization. So, you know, if a new frontier model is finding thousands of new bugs, which do we have to target first, right? Which, and more importantly, which will the criminals actually use? Because they're the ones we really have to actually address, right? And you kind of work it through. So it's a whole program approach to tackling this. It's not just any one stage in the actual.
And I think your point about like which ones do we tackle first is very important, right? So, you know, Anthropic's tools are finding many, many vulnerabilities, some of which have exploits that are chained together to exploit those vulnerabilities, some of which actually we haven't found working exploits to go after. So which one do you want to prioritize and patch first? Obviously, it's the exploitable one.
Yep. Exactly.
All right, so we're getting close to the end here. I'm going to say just one quick thing. So a bunch of the questions have come in, and I'm not deliberately ignoring them. We only have so much time, but around TrendAI, our capabilities, the way that we're building things collaboratively with you, we're going to have a breakout session tomorrow. There's going to be 2 breakout sessions, actually. So this is an advertisement for you to think about where you are going to be for the breakouts. We're going to have a more business-focused one, and we're going to have a more technically focused one. So for those that have questions around how TrendAI is helping you and the way it's working, the more technically focused one is a great room. It's called the control room in your agenda on the app. So another advertisement for the app. Take a look at that. But we'll have a ton of opportunity, not only to hear, but for you to ask more questions about TrendAI and Vision One and how we're working to help you. All right, I have one last question, and I want every one of you to put your crystal ball on, your future vision on. Greg, you asked a really unfair question, but I'm going to ask it because no softballs, right, Rob? When we look back 10 years from now, I was going to say 5, but man, Greg, you're making them work hard. 10 years, what are we going to realize that we did completely wrong?
Good one.
Yeah, I know. What a wrap-up, right? So just for people that know me, sometimes I get them to do the Macarena. This one, I'm going to ask them to look to the future. So
I don't mind starting this one.
Okay.
If we're talking about, like, I'm going to pitch this specifically in the plate with AI specifically, and AI security follows behind this. This was actually a conversation I was having yesterday with Dr. Grace as well. And it's the concept that I think in today's age, we're actually thinking we're in the wrong spot. We think we're innovating and transforming with AI, and we're barely scratching the surface of disruption with AI today. So I think we believe we're much further along than we are, and I think we're going to look back in 10 years and say, wow, we didn't know anything, and we weren't really using it well.
Okay.
I like what you just said. You said transforming AI. I believe AI is transforming us.
Ooh, I like
when
that.
it comes down to people, and I believe, again, I'm a psychologist too, so the people thing, but at the end of the day, we're all people, right? We have to utilize the technology. We have to upskill ourselves. I think one of the things is that a lot of people stop and wait. Forget about, we were talking about organizations, what they do in order to advance themselves. I think we as people need to understand what we want to do, how we want to affect change, how we want to grow within our businesses, and how we want to be secure within our own lives, but also within our work lives. I think we have to upskill ourselves. I think we have to ask the questions. And I think a lot of folks don't ask the questions, don't understand the whys, but do what they're told because they're good soldiers. But I think looking back, and I'm sure a lot of us can all look back in our lives and say, when I was a teenager, my goodness, I should have done A, B, C, D, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of us didn't have, high-tech stuff to capture what we did back then, but we do now. So upskill ourselves, understand the whys, understand that we need to be our own advocates as well to really understand where the markets are going, get the right skills, put them to use, and speak to the folks within your organization to help not just advance the organization, but advance yourself within the organization, gather that data, and do it right. Have the right conversations, and be your own CEO of yourself.
My first week in Anthropic, and we hired the best AI researchers in the world. I was in the cafeteria at our headquarters in San Francisco, and I overheard a few researchers talking about whether Claude had a soul or not. And I remember thinking to myself, these people are insane. And then I was there for, like a few weeks, and I started hearing the conversations about Claude having a soul. And I was like, maybe Claude does have a soul. And the whole point of that is, I think we're underestimating how fast we are moving towards AGI and RSI, which is recursive self-improvement.
Yeah.
These models are step-changing improvement, and Claude is writing more and more of Claude's code, each model that we release, and we're getting towards this point where the models are working for so long, and I mentioned Meter, and if you look at the Meter statistics about how long a model is able to work, I think, and if you listen to Dario, who's been pretty prescient about the speed of AI and where we're going, I think we're going to be caught off guard as a society about just how quickly we're going to reach really, really powerful AI.
Yep. And I think it is very, very hard to kind of do that 10-year kind of framework. And literally, this is the job of one of my teams to do forward-looking threat research, right? But if you can look at a similar example in the past, which was when the internet came out. If you go back to the very start of when the internet came out, people thought it was going to replace the postal system with email, and that we were going to have all the knowledge of humanity on websites that we could access. But nobody was talking about what happens when social media gets invented. What happens when online commerce completely changes like those shops everybody goes into today? Or what happens when you take every culture on the planet, you put them in one chat room, and it tears apart the geopolitics of our world, right? So like it's those second order effects are what the internet actually brought us, not the first things we see. So the number one thing I would say to everybody is just, as scary as it can be with the rate of change, embrace every piece of knowledge you can, constantly learn about it, constantly think, what does it mean next for not just your organizations, but your families? And what does it mean to live in that new world of AI fearlessly?